Okay, I just finished the video as I record this right now, and I usually like to get straight into working on the car, but I really gotta say a few things before we start this video. I'm gonna try to make it really quick though. Since the last episode, my college classes have started back up, so I've been super busy and have had less time for video stuff, working on the car, and even just working to earn some spare money that isn't going towards rent. This car has been a pretty big burden on my college student budget, so I've been trying to cut back on some personal stuff to keep the MR2 project going. I'm hoping once it gets back on the road, I can do some cheaper, more custom-made mods on it while I save up again. Regardless, I am dedicated to progressing on this thing, even if it's a bit slower now. Now with that in mind, what I really wanted to say was thank you to everyone for watching and supporting the series so far. Having the car in my life is obviously my main reward for working on it, but even just reading the countless comments and messages I get from people saying they enjoy the series or have been inspired to work on their own car is huge to me. Part of why I'm making this series is to really show people that working on cars, restoring them, and doing custom work isn't always as hard or expensive as some people think. As long as you have the drive, you can really do a lot of the stuff yourself and make it your own. And yeah, cars are inherently expensive, but there are a lot of things that you can do more affordably and still make them nice, so I'm glad people are enjoying the videos. Now, okay, last thing before we get back to work is thank you so much to my patrons Redley and Maxwell, but also I'd like to thank Anise for sending me a donation as well. Huge thanks, that along with all the views really helped make all my videos feel like they really mean something. And with that out of the way, let's get to it. We got a big episode today. I did it. I managed to buy the most expensive part for the MR2 so far, some new tires for the freshly painted wheels. I'm getting so close to getting the car back on the road now. I originally wanted some Toyo tires, but they didn't have any in my size around here, so I got some Falcons. They look pretty sweet though. I also got some paint pens because I plan on painting in the lettering on the tires to really complete the fresh new wheels. Anise, this is what your donation got me, so thanks to you. Another big step I made was I found a complete exhaust on Craigslist for 50 bucks. I had to drive quite a distance for it, but considering if I bought just a new muffler without any of this other piping or a cat, then I'd be spending at least $100 right there, so pretty good deal. I'll also probably want to replace the catalytic converter at some point because it's probably pretty old and dirty, but it should work for now. Also, the muffler itself seems to be in good shape, but I have run into a couple problems I need to work out. First off, the muffler has these mounts on it which are supposed to mount to a hanger on the bottom of the car, but if we look at my car, we can see the guy who straight piped it just took the hangers off and decided not to put them back. They aren't just generic universal ones either, they are specific to the car. So I got two options now. I can either order a used set on eBay for $50 or I can try to make my own. $50 is a bit steep, but honestly I think that's the route I'm gonna take just so I don't risk my muffler falling off while I'm driving. The other issue I've run into is I was hoping to just bolt this up onto the exhaust manifold on the engine since I now have the complete exhaust piping. However, I've realized this exhaust is off an early Mark 1A while my car is a later Mark 1B. So if you look at what's left of my exhaust, you can see there is an O2 sensor port while the new piping doesn't have this. Well, it turns out the older MR2s, they put this part in the exhaust manifold while on the later ones, like mine, it's down here. I need to have this port though because the engine uses it to sense the exhaust and adjust the fuel mixture. So my plan is to take the car and all my parts to a muffler shop and see if they can either weld a new port on my new exhaust or if they can just cut the two exhausts in half and weld them together after the O2 port. Considering I have everything and it's like one weld job, I can't imagine it'd cost too much, but we'll see when we get there. The last thing about the muffler is it's a bit dirty, but not terrible. I'm tempted to try to clean it up and paint it later on. Also, I got more Goo Gone for when I get the wheels on. I'm gonna roll the car out and try to spray the rest of the Plasti Dip off. And as we get closer to driving the car, I picked up a fire extinguisher. It was on sale for 13 bucks, and it's probably a good idea to have on hand. Maybe I can find a place to mount it in the cockpit as well. Tires and an exhaust were the two major things keeping this car from being a daily for me, so it feels good to have both almost ready, even if we got a few more hurdles to jump through. School has been keeping me from working on car and video stuff, but the one plus is with classes being online this quarter, I've had plenty of time to sew while I sit through them. So we finally got one completely hand-sewn seat cover just about done. I gotta sew a couple hooks in order to properly mount it, but man, I really hope it looks good when it's all together. There's really no way to know until you finally get it all and mounted together, but in celebration of finishing them, I picked up something special for them. I thought some cool final touches would be a couple patches on the sides, help give them some more character. The first patch I got is a retro Toyota logo one. I almost got one with just the red center part, but bigger as the whole patch, but I kind of like this white and red one better. It pops a bit more. Now, I actually took 3 years of Japanese in high school, and from the very little I remember, I was able to decipher what the top part says, because I was pretty curious. So in Japanese characters, it says Supekuta Ofurodo. So obviously the right translates to off-road, but the left stumped me. I did some digging and figured out it's actually Spectre. So it's Spectre off-road, which is an old Toyota Jeep sort of thing. I wasn't able to figure out what the bottom says though. Admittedly, it's kind of funny it's referencing a different car, but honestly, I still just bought them because they look cooler than just the plain red ones. If I get enough crap for it, then maybe someday I'll swap it. For the other patches, I wanted something space themed because of the spaceship looking aesthetic of the MR2. I thought these looked really cool. I'm not sure which I'll use on the seat quite yet, but I think I'm leaning towards the red one. Then maybe I'll use the blue one on the sun visor or door or something. I'm thinking of doing one patch on each shoulder, kind of like this. I really like the space patch, super glad I found it. Gonna look super cool on the seat, I think. After sewing a whole entire seat, adding a patch is no hard task at this point. Looking so good, it really pops out just right. I'm sewing the other patch now. Again, this is the passenger seat I have done, so I'm thinking the Toyota patch will face outwards towards the door, and the space patch will face inwards. Looking sweet, completes the Space Commander look the seats have. We'll have to see what I do with this other patch. I'm sure I'll find something cool for it though. My dad and I were trying to replace the old license plate, and the screws are impossible to get out. My dad had to resort to using a vice grip to slowly turn the bolt. The last owner seemed to have used an imperial bolt instead of a proper metric one, so the threads are completely off and he just jammed it in. Honestly, I have no idea how he managed to get this through with how tight it is, and even less of an idea how it didn't permanently damage the threads. Now that I got the tires and seats almost ready, it's about time to start putting the interior back together for now. First thing is the freshly painted ashtray. Looking nice. I do need to clean out and repaint the area where the lighter goes though. Starting off screwing the steering column covers now that the steering wheel is back on. Part of me still wants to take out the faded gauge cluster and try to either recolor it or create some custom gauge faces for it, but we'll just have to save that for another time. Getting the gauge cluster wraparound is luckily pretty easy since all the screws are exposed and easily accessible. One thing is I still need to find a new one though, since mine is cracked pretty bad and won't fit quite right because of it, but I got other things to deal with first. Ah yes, I can turn the headlights on again. Never gets old. I realized I forgot to put this thing in first, so I gotta go back and redo everything again. Alright, didn't take too long, and now I can finally just slide and bolt down the top cover into place. Looking good. Still a ways to go, but better and cleaner than it was when I first got it. Okay, this next thing is gonna take some explaining. So when I first drove the MR2 home, one of the things I noticed was the brakes fluctuated between firm and really squishy, so naturally my dad and I did a brake bleed last week on the car, hopefully to fix it. Well, just now while working on the car, I noticed a puddle in the frunk. At first I was like, how did I not notice there was a puddle of water there? So I wiped it up, and immediately after my hands felt and smelled weird. Well, I traced the trail of liquid and realized it was my brake master cylinder leaking. I did a quick press on the pedal and it literally shot more out instantly, so my brake problems all make sense now. What the brake master cylinder does is basically when you press the brake pedal, you're actually activating this thing, which will pump brake fluid through your brake lines to stop your car. Luckily, it's pretty straightforward to get out, but the bolts are very tightly on. Blood, sweat, and tears for this car, man. I also got to take out the liner to clean now or replace since it's soaked in brake fluid. Another thing is when I get the car out finally, I gotta remember to spray and wash away the brake fluid in here because it'll strip the paint over time. Just did a quick search and I can order a new master cylinder for about $100, so I'm gonna place an order, but kind of a bummer. While I'm in here, I want to also remove the windshield washer fluid tank. I think I've used a washer maybe like twice in my life, and I'd rather just save a couple pounds and remove it. Plus, when I do body work and repaint the car, I want to remove the sprayers so I can keep the hood clean and smooth. Time to get these tires painted now. First thing to do is clean it off really good with some soap and then wipe it down with a damp rag and let it dry. Part of me is worried I'm gonna ruin my new tire, but we'll just see how it goes on the one tire first. I started off going slow at first, trying to be careful, but you can actually be on the sloppy side because the real key is to use a needle or toothpick and dip it in rubbing alcohol. Then you can use it to pick away at the parts where you went outside the line. If it's runny enough with alcohol, you can even wipe it with your finger. Either way you go, it's definitely a slow process, but pretty easy. The last touch, of course, is to paint the red on the F. There's my first coat so far. I'm gonna do a second coat and call it good. Just finished the tire. I did 2 coats on everything and I think it looks great. It really adds a lot to the wheels, I think. It took me about 45 minutes to do, but I still got 3 other wheels, which I'll do later. I am a bit skeptical about how long it'll last on there, but worst case I can touch it up or see if there's a better method later. Last video I got an old Toyota Tacoma stereo off Facebook for 10 bucks and the cassette player didn't work. Well, I found another one off Facebook again and the guy swore the cassette player worked, so I picked it up for $40 this time. It all works great and plugs straight in like the last one. One little surprise is for some reason this one has an orange backlight to it. The last one was green. I've never seen an orange backlight before, but I think it actually matches the car even better. Now that I can actually test a cassette properly, I was able to tell the dash speakers are also a bit blown out, so I'm gonna take them out and get some replacements. This one on the right side looks easy enough to do, but the one on the left side worries me a bit. I'm really hoping I don't have to remove the whole instrument cluster to get to it, cause it's covered just a bit by it. Luckily, I was able to just squeeze it out with some tools and get to the speaker, so no problem at all. As expected, you can see the old speaker is torn up and cracked. You can especially see it when you hold it up to a light. It's a 4-inch speaker, so I may have a couple spares laying around somewhere, but the main thing is these use only 2 mounts in order to fit, so I'll probably have to cut the 3rd and 4th mounts off of any normal speaker. I had a bit of time before dinner and got another tire done, but then I ran out of ink in my fine point pen, so I gotta stop at the store at some point to finish the other 2. And now it is time to end what has been the longest restoration part for the car so far. It's time to install the new seat cover. My plan is to install it basically backwards how I took the old one off, so I'm gonna turn it inside out and work it down the seat so I can hook all the clips in place as I go. Alright, I'm at the first hook. I'm using the wire from the original seat. It just slides into the flap I sewed on. What I need to do is work some hog rings around the wire and then hook it onto a similar wire that connects to the actual seat. Then I gotta tighten and close the rings so it stays. This just keeps the front of the cover tight to the seat rather than lifting up with the side bolsters. I'm a little bit off center. I think I'll be able to just rotate the cover a bit to get it in place though. It's still a little bit off, but I think it's good enough that it'll mold into place as it gets used. Worst case later, maybe I'll just take it off and redo later, but we'll see. The next part is to hook the bottom parts together. Again, I'm just using some hog rings on the wire, but this time I'm gonna do a ring on each side instead of just one. Here's a close-up of the ring. You can see I pressed it together to create the loop. Now what I'm gonna do is use zip ties through the rings to connect the two ends together. I'm doing it this way because then I can more easily tighten it and even just cut it off if I need to do something later on the seat. And bam, we got a backrest just about ready. One thing I realized I forgot is there's supposed to be one more flap right there to fill that gap, but I don't think it'll actually show too much when the brackets that hold the seat together are installed. Looks good. It's a bit wavy at some parts, but I think I can fix that later. Now to do the headrest. I'm pretty sure I just have to poke some holes and slide it into place. I don't know why, but it's not clicking into place like it should, so I'm gonna try to reach under and feel around what's going on. Okay, I just got it. One part was a little bent, but I was able to work it back in. Now the headrest just slides into place and I got to hook on the accordion covers. Looking sweet so far. The final part. For this, I'm just gonna use zip ties without any rings to connect all the wire hooks together. Pretty easy stuff. There's just 2 pairs of mounting wires to do. For the underside, it was too difficult to feed the old wire all the way around the seat, so I'm just gonna use 2 new wires, half the length, and feed them in on each side. Then I'm gonna use some rings and zip ties to hook onto different parts on the underside and keep the cover in place. I can only do it on the one side for now because the other side has some bolts I gotta worry about in a bit. Now to tie together the center flaps, I probably should have put another wire on the second flap, but the original didn't have it, so whatever. I mean, it just really needs to hold it in place. It doesn't need to be super tight. The seat came out a little cleaner, pretty good fit. So close to finishing, just gotta mount it all together now. One side simply bolts on the underside of the seat, so it's pretty straightforward. The other side, however, actually has the bolts facing out on the side, so they poke through the seat cover. Simply just have to mark where they are and cut through. Now that I have that taken care of, I can zip tie this side down and bolt on the seat mount into place. Honestly, it's a miracle I didn't misplace or lose any of these pieces over time. Connecting the seat to the backrest is pretty easy on one side because it's just an exposed bolt. But the other side has 2 bolts that are hidden under the cover, so you gotta reach up into it and try to blindly line everything up. After a good couple minutes, I was able to do it though. And finally, after all that work, we have one seat completed. Seeing it all together after all this time feels so good. It looks great. I mean, it's a bit wavy, but I think it'll stretch over time and mold better. Plus, I hear you can use like a heat gun to help shape it better, so I may give that a try later on. And the patches really give it that extra pop of color I think it needs since it's all black. Definitely a nice touch on each side. I may be a little biased, but this is easily one of the best seats I've ever sat in. Again, this is the passenger side seat, but my plan is to see if I can use it on the driver's side for now until I finish the other one. All right, it's the next day and I really want to get the seat in the car, but before I can, I do have to put back together the sub speaker that goes under the seat. I found a speaker in my stash that happens to fit. I just had to drill the holes out a tiny bit. Putting it all back together is pretty straightforward, but the new speaker is slightly taller, so I had to remove the foam. Also, I would like to finish restoring this box someday, but I can't figure out a good way to sand the grill since it doesn't come off. You can see there's a slight gap since the speaker is a bit taller, but it'll do for now, especially since the thing goes under the seat, so it's never seen anyways. I'm also considering just honestly removing the speaker box entirely and save a bit of weight on the car. I mean, it's only maybe a pound, but I feel like the speaker probably isn't gonna add much to my music anyways, but we'll see as I drive the car. Okay, it looks like the passenger seat and the driver's seat have slightly different bolt patterns, so I won't be able to use this one for now. Kinda disappointing, but at least it'll give me motivation to get the other seat actually done quickly. At least now I have more time to get other things ready before driving again as well. The seat did smoothly bolt into the passenger side as expected though, and even that is a satisfying moment to see. man, what a sweet upgrade to the interior so far. It just looks so cool. Also, while I was at it, I had to bring one of the wheels over to see how it looks too. I'm very happy with my progress. I have to admit, it's pretty funny. The wheels are gonna be like the nicest part of the whole body of the car right now, but we're getting there. It's been about a week and I got my new BrakeMaster cylinder in the mail. $100 I didn't want to spend, but luckily it's at least a direct fit. I just cleaned out the old brake fluid reservoir that sits on top, so I'm gonna wait and let it dry before installing it and bleeding the brakes. I originally wanted to do a full tune-up and fluid change before getting the car back on the road, but due to short funds, I'm just gonna do it later when I can afford it. But the most important maintenance is changing the oil, so I'm definitely gonna do that today. The engine takes a bit under 4 quarts, so I got that and a new filter too. If you've never changed oil yourself, you really should start doing it. It's a major part of keeping these old engines running. The oil drain is just right under the engine, which you can see there. You can also usually find it pasted on the oil stains under it. Taking the oil drain plug off is simple enough. You just unbolt it, but doing so without making a mess is an acquired skill. You don't have to do this, but I just jacked the back of the car up a bit more to really get the extra oil out. And I'm looking around while I wait, and man, there is a ton of dirty oil and gunk under here. I mean, that's expected, but man, it'll be good to someday rebuild the engine and clean this all out. Now to do the oil filter, it's located on the side of the engine closest to the front of the car, and it's such a terrible spot to get out. If you really can't find it, just follow the exhaust pipe and you'll see it. I'd show you on camera, but I can't even get a good enough angle to film it. It's really crammed back there, making it hard to reach your hand and get a good grip on it, but the filter on my car is tightly on too, which there are tools to help get these filters off, but again, it's so crammed, I don't think I'd be able to fit the tool in there anyways. In these cases, the last resort solution is to hammer a screwdriver straight into the side of the filter and use that as leverage to free it. I only recommend doing this as a last resort though, because if you manage to mess this up and rip the filter in half, then you're pretty screwed. Also, it'll drip oil, so be ready for that. Okay, I just did it and realized I wasn't filming, but it did work. There wasn't a lot of space to work with, but there was just enough to get the screwdriver in and turn the filter a tiny bit to loosen it. Now I'm gonna go under and unscrew the filter the rest of the way off with my hand. Now this whole thing is why I got this K&N filter. One, it's a nicer quality, and two, it has this nut on top, so you can use a wrench to help pop it on and off. Before you get the new filter on, you gotta line the rubber ring with oil to help seal it. With that, you can finally just screw it on. Follow the directions on the filter for how tight to do, but generally you hand tighten it the best you can, then tighten it on an extra quarter turn. See, the thing is you want it tight enough that it doesn't leak, but not so tight that it's impossible to get off again. For filling the oil, first make sure the drain plug is back on, then use a funnel and pour it in. The MR2 takes about 3.5 quarts, but the key is to pour in a bit at a time and check the level, because realistically you can't get all the old oil out of the engine by draining it. The dipstick is that yellow thing in there. I seriously highly recommend checking this thing like every week when the car is cool, because if your car is leaking or burning oil, then you may lose too much oil and end up damaging the engine. So seriously, check this thing and top off oil when you need. To check it, when the car is cool, just pull it out, wipe it with a paper towel, then put it back in. Then finally you pull it out again and see where the oil level is on the stick. It should be between full and empty. Too low and you'll wear out the engine, too high and you'll end up blowing something. This is why you want to check it as you go pouring new oil, because you don't want to overfill it. This is all pretty basic car stuff, I know, but again, to anyone watching who's not aware of this sort of stuff, please check your oil. The level looks good. I actually came pretty close to overfilling it, so now I'm gonna go start the car for a minute and just let the oil flow through the engine and filter and check the underside to make sure nothing is leaking. The last step is just to turn the car off and wait like 20 minutes for it to settle and cool again, and then check the oil level one last time before calling it good. After all that, the brake fluid reservoir dried, so I put it back on too. I don't have much else to do right now, so I'm gonna properly install the new stereo. Again, I tested this one, it works, so I can mount it in now. Considering the wire plugs all matched up, I'm assuming the brackets will too, so I'm thinking all I gotta do is unbolt the ones off the old stereo and remount them to the new one. Should be easy enough. Seems to fit fine, so now I just gotta bolt everything in place and then put the cover on. The trim cover that goes around the center console has 2 screws that hold it in place. You can see the screw up top is what I'm assuming is the original, and the screw on the bottom seems to be some random one the last owner decided to use when he lost the correct one. The new screw is way too long and sticks out, so I'll have to just remember to grab a proper replacement next time I'm at the store. Putting it together is easy. There's just 2 clips on the bottom you need to line up, then you can screw in the top screws. My center console trim is not perfect and has some tears in it, as well as cracks where the screws go, plus one of the bottom clips is missing. It'll do for now, but I'm either gonna have to find a way to repair it, or they actually do sell a new reproduction one online at the moment for like 50 bucks. If I repaired it, I'd probably have to rewrap it in new vinyl and find a way to fix up the cracks. It wouldn't cost a lot, but it seems like a bit of effort to make it look right, so for $50, I may just order a new one eventually, but who knows how long they'll keep making them. Center console back together, sure looks good. The interior is really coming together. Nowhere near done or fully restored, but approaching a good enough for now state. The heater controls have definitely seen better days too. Nothing is cracked or broken, but the labels are all faded. I think at some point I could probably make some new stickers for them. Either just replicate the original design or maybe do something fancy and more custom. It's been about 3 weeks since I last worked on the car. I've been super busy trying to work to pay rent and chipping away at my endless homework. But in that time, I have slowly been working on the driver's seat and finally have it done. And man, it came out just about as perfect as I could have wanted. There are still some little wrinkles, but they're so whatever. Plus, I'm pretty confident those will come out with some heat if I really wanted. I mean, for being 100% hand sewn and costing like 60 bucks, this is as good as it gets. The fit is even better than the passenger one. It makes me kind of want to go back and reinstall the passenger one because I think I may have just put it on a bit crooked, but we'll do that another time. I didn't film installing this cover, but it was pretty much the same process except for some slight extra work because of the additional controls and slightly different mounting. Like on the passenger seat, I left out this one piece that covers this section. It's a really small piece, so I probably just forgot it in the pile of other pieces. Pretty minor, I'll probably just leave it for now and sew it on later, some other day. When I eventually do that, I'll probably sand and refinish the mounting pieces because they have a small amount of surface rust, but nothing bad at all. The seat fits perfect in the car as expected. Seriously, huge milestone, and with that, I can finally get the car back on the road. At least for a little test drive now. My dad and I bled the brakes off camera just now. I didn't film it because it was a 2-person job, and brake fluid is pretty nasty stuff to get on the camera when it inevitably spills on my hands, so it's pretty universal though, so if you really need to know, you can just look it up. So there are just a couple last things to get the car off jacks and on the road. Finally, now mounting the wheels. They look so good. Can't wait for the whole car to look as fresh and renewed as these do. Last thing to do is remount the bottom guards that go under the car. I left them off from when I did the speedometer cable and parking brake cables because I went and bought some new replacement bolts for them. The old ones were rusty and a couple heads snapped. Makes sense since they are exposed under the car, but definitely better to replace them now rather than wait for all of them to rust and snap eventually. I just took the old ones to the store and matched them with new ones, only costed a few bucks. I still have to remount the hood as well, but it's still in the back from when I was cleaning it, so I'll do that once the car is pulled out. And now finally, after all this time, I can bring the car back down. I gotta say, it's weird seeing the car so low like this. Very sleek. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the car out now and take it for a quick little spin. Finally, the MR2 can leave the garage for the first time since I bought it. Imagine I mess up lining these ramps up right now and end up scraping my bottom beyond repair. This is surreal to see it outside again. Time to get the hood. I still gotta finish cleaning this thing off from the plasti dip, but now that the car moves, I can just spray the whole car down and try to clean it all so it's not this terrible half plasti dip, half worn out paint job. My family is pretty funny. One car comes out and another comes in. Now that the MR2 can easily move, it gets a spot closer to the front, and this MGB GT is taking its spot for now. I love convertibles, but the MGB GT Coupe is just so sweet versus the normal Roadster. The MR2 is nowhere near done, but man, it's a huge step. I'd say the first stage of my restoration is almost done. After 3 months of sitting in the garage from the very first day I bought it, it's now in a more pleasant state than it was. I've gotten appropriate wheels with new tires, reupholstered the seats and sun visors, got a stock steering wheel, fixed the speedometer, fixed the brakes, replaced the stereo, began my full tune-up, and gotten a few other things ready for finishing my first phase of restoration, getting it to a point of being a daily driver. To complete that, I still got to get my muffler fitted properly and finish my tune-up with the rest of my fluid change, new ignition pieces, and new belts. Hopefully we can get this taken care of next episode if I can save up enough, and I'll have to do a driving impressions update too, but for now, the car is drivable, so I'm just gonna go and enjoy it real quick. I feel like after 3 months, this is pretty well deserved.